bring in Ramona Shelburne, ESPN NBA insider, senior writer. I know you were going to come on and talk about the Phoenix Suns situation. Let me ask about what's going on with the Boston Celtics here. A possible year-long suspension. This came out of nowhere, Ramona.
Ooh. Yeah, it's been behind the scenes, and we've, last night it came out, and I'm kind of tempering my reaction until we get all the details here, but it's obviously really sad. I mean, this is Ime Udoka is one of the great young coaches in the NBA, and took the Boston Celtics to the NBA Finals last year. So, from what I understand about this, Dan, it is a really serious situation. We wouldn't be having this discussion, and they wouldn't be having these discussions if it wasn't. But whenever something is as in this situation, I think we need to reserve our judgment on all this until everything comes out, until all the facts come out. And on this one, I'm not sure how much all the facts will come out. I think there'll be some, but this is being held very close to the vest, and it has been for a little while there in Boston until it's finally come out.
I'm just trying to understand what would warrant a season-long suspension if he said it was a consensual relationship, but
well, in the workplace, you have power dynamics, right? I mean, there's
I understand being disciplined because of that, that he's somebody's superior, but for a year.
Right. Same for me. That's when I first heard about this, that was my thought too. It's like, that felt very severe. It felt now we had a similar situation in Minnesota a couple of years ago with Gerson Rosas, who is the president of basketball operations, who had a consensual relationship with a team employee, and both Rosas and the team employee ended up leaving the organization, and it was sort of their own volition, but it was against team policy and against organizational rules. And so we found out some of the details, but again, there was because both of them stepped away, you only got some of the story. And I'm wondering how this is going to play out in the next couple of days, but it's a messy, dicey situation, and obviously very serious to warrant a year-long suspension. I mean, there's, that's a long punishment for a bright young coach who had just had so much success last year.
If I told you a week ago, Robert Sarver will be selling the Phoenix Suns Phoenix Mercury now, what would your reaction have been?
I would have given you a nice nod. I don't think I expected him to sell this quickly. I thought he would eventually sell the whole time, because even whether it was going to happen now or 6 months from now or closer to when that year-long suspension was going to be up, I just didn't see a path for him to continue owning and operating an NBA franchise after what was in that report. If you really sat down and read the 43 pages, which Chris Paul did, which Devin Booker did, DeAndre Ayton, all the star players in that organization, people actually read the report, which I think is why there's been somewhat of a delayed reaction to it. So when I covered the Donald Sterling situation in 2014, one of the issues was, it was tape. We all heard the tape, and you have this very gut level, visceral reaction to a tape, and everybody hears the same thing. This is different in that a lot of the reporting is off the record or sourced. There's not names on these situations. There's no tape for you to listen to. And you actually have to read 43 pages of report, some of which the details are not all, they don't go all the way with the details because they're protecting the people whose stories they are. They're protecting their identities. And so there was a delayed reaction on this of the outcry and the outrage in the time that it took for people to read a report. And I remember thinking to myself, like, that's interesting. At this age, like, how often do you read a full book? How often do people read more than what they see in a tweet or a short article? I actually give people a lot of credit for sitting down and going through that report and digesting it in that time frame.
It feels like there was pressure applied somewhere. I don't know who applied the pressure.
So the pressure was applied publicly by the players. You heard what Steph Curry. You heard what Chris Paul said, what LeBron James tweeted, what Draymond Green said, but it was also applied privately. behind the scenes, there was a lot said and done by Adam with Robert Sarver, and then frankly the sponsors. PayPal is the only sponsor that came forward publicly to announce what happened with Robert Sarver, saying they did an association with the Suns afterwards. But there were, from what I understand, a lot of sponsors that were joining the line, and the dominoes were going to start falling pretty soon. And I think yesterday, in Robert announcing he was going to sell the team, was probably about the last time he would have been able to make that announcement or decision really of his own volition on his own time frame, because the walls were going to start closing in.
Yeah, I thought that when the commissioner said, hey, I can't do anything, can he start the process of asking the other owners or governors about that? That's what I wonder. Hey, I can't take away his team.
Yeah.
But Roger Goodell did this when, hey, I can't take away Daniel Snyder. Well, can you start the process? And I wondered if if Adam Silver was going to start the process with the other owners.
I think that was on the table. I don't think that had started, Dan. I don't think that process. But there's one pretty big difference in that in the NFL, when the report came out on the Commanders and Dan Snyder and all that, that report wasn't released in full. It wasn't really, we weren't given a lot of details. The NBA report is not the full report, of course. There was 320 witnesses who were interviewed. And it was distilled down into 43 pages, but there were still 43 pages. And they were pretty specific on certain incidents. And I thought there was, in a way, that was the process, right? That is starting the process. Like you drop that into the water and give people time to read it and digest it. And I think the longer that was in the public consciousness, the more people read it, the more, and I have to give a lot of credit to the players who talked about it publicly, because they did it before they were asked, right? LeBron James wasn't asked his opinion. He just gave it on Twitter, and neither was Chris Paul. But they were specific and they were public in what they called for. And I just there wasn't going to be a path for Robert Sarver to keep owning the team. He was going to fight. He fought real hard behind the scenes to keep owning the team. But once the sponsors started pulling out or were about to start pulling out in mass, that's when I think things really changed for him and for the league. And they ended up in a place where, and let's be real about it, if you're the other owners in the NBA, in Congress, when they vote on something, it's all public, right? It's on C-SPAN and you see who votes on everything and you have a record. In the NBA, those votes are supposed to be private, but you and I both know that every vote would have leaked. We would have found out who voted for what. And, there's if they had voted for Robert Sarver to stay in the league, you'd have to answer for that. If you'd voted against Robert Sarver, you'd have to answer for that. It was a vote no one really wanted to take or make. And I think, and this is how these things usually go, Robert Sarver became very bad for business, right? For the NBA business and for the Suns business. And that's why we saw him voluntarily decide to sell. Now, he's going to do a lot of business on this sale, man. It's going to bought the team for about $400 million, and he's going to, I think he'll get just in my conversations, I think it'll go for above $3 billion.
$3 billion.
It's a lot of money.
Wow.
I mean, so there's a lot of debate over that right now, but we have a few guidelines, which is they were valued when there was a Dial Capital, which is a hedge fund, invested in them last summer and in 2021, and it was a 1.55 billion valuation for a minority share. Okay, so that's not control. This would be buying the team with full control. And so that's worth a lot more than 1.55. That was also a year ago. And now we're coming up on a new CBA, new TV rights deal. The NBA is a whole lot more valuable than it was even a year ago. It's recovered from the pandemic. All the viewership and rights are up. I think this could be an incredible number when this finally goes through.
Potential owners. Seems like you got some guys who certainly have the money.
Yeah.
What are you hearing?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's still really early, and the important thing to remember here is Sarver has control of the sale. I mean, when Shelley Sterling sold the Clippers, she got to decide. She said, "I want to sell it to one guy. I don't want to sell it to a group."
The league doesn't have any say in this?
Yeah, they'll approve. They'll approve at the ESPN, but it's his team, it's his franchise. He gets to decide. It's like, if I sell my house, I get to choose the buyer, right? And so there is some influence they'll get to have, but he still has quite a bit of leverage here. And that's important, because when we look at potential owners from within, like let's say the minority partners, people who own smaller stakes in the Suns now, would he sell to one of his co-owners now, or is it going to come from the outside? My understanding is that most likely going to come from the outside. And maybe the relationship with Sarver might matter here. Generally speaking, when it comes down to it, highest bidder wins, right? But there's going to be a lot of interest here. I've already heard names like Jeff Bezos, Bob Iger, who used to run Disney, Lorraine Jobs, Larry Ellison. These are names that have been out there. The estate of Sheldon Adelson. There's a lot of interest in this. And plus, I think somebody told me yesterday, always think about who own minority shares in NBA teams right now. Because a lot of times owners, it's like you join an ownership group in one city, and then a couple of years later you get enough money, you can put a group together yourself. And so those are a lot of candidates we haven't even thought about yet. But there'll be a lot of interest in the Suns, because it's a great market. Phoenix, you can go to Scottsdale all the time, right? Great market, great team, and it's a good time for the NBA with the TV rights deal and the new CBA coming up.
Thanks for joining us, Ramona. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan.
That's Ramona Shelburne, ESPN NBA insider, senior writer there. A lot of good information there.